Welcome to Work in Progress, Conversations with Creators. I'm your host, Logan Roy Speitman. On today's show, I have with me Sophia Heymans, who's a really fantastic painter. She has a show at the Valley in Santa Fe this month, and we talked about her art and growing up in a rural part of Minnesota and a lot of other things. I hope that you enjoy.
If you enjoy our podcast, please like and subscribe and consider becoming a digital subscriber to the Albuquerque Journal to help us bring you more content like this. You can find this episode and all of our podcasts on the Albuquerque Journal website, abqjournal.com, as well as YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. See the show notes for a discount code on a digital subscription. Thank you for supporting the Albuquerque Journal, New Mexico's leading news.
Hi, Sophia. Thanks so much for joining me here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I was excited to speak with you. I've seen your work at the Valley in Taos, and now they're in Santa Fe. And I believe I saw your work at Shrine in New York also.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, where you've shown it's a great gallery as well. And yeah, it's an interesting body of work that you've been developing, and which I think. Hopefully we'll put up a couple images on the screen so people that aren't familiar can see. But typically it's kind of, landscapes, but then as you look at them, you see faces and figures emerge within them. Is that a kind of a good way to just kind of describe what people see?
I think that's right. It's really hard for me to even describe my own work. So, but that's usually the first thing I talk about is the human figures that are hidden within the landscapes.
Yeah, and when did you start kind of working in that vein?
I've been doing landscapes now, pretty much primarily landscapes for about 15 years. I started making them while I was in college, but I started introducing the human figures when I moved to New York City 9 years ago. I think there's just something about being in a city and such a human-centric place that made me want to introduce people back into the work.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, let's talk a little bit about that, about the places that you've lived. And you mentioned college. That was RISD, right?
Yeah.
Where you went. But you were coming from Minnesota.
Yeah, and that's where I'm back in Minnesota now. I actually just moved back here about a month ago after being in New York for 9 years. So yeah, it's a big move, and I'm back in the area where I grew up, which is great.
Which is what's that area?
It's central Minnesota, near St. Joseph. St. Cloud is like the nearest major city, but it's about an hour northwest of the Twin Cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul.
So kind of close to the cities, but a little bit a different feel.
Yeah, it's more rural, but really easy to get down to Minneapolis for different events and things like that. It's great.
What was it like growing up there?
It was awesome because we grew up on a kind of a family commune. There was a hog farm that was owned by the monastery that's here. So there was actually a bunch of nuns living out there, and they had this hog farm that they supplied the meat for the monastery. And they ended up selling that land to my uncle about 40 years ago. And then he lived there with his family, and then my other aunt and uncle came and raised their family there, and then my parents were the last to come up when we were little kids, and it's like 80 acres of wetlands and prairie, and my uncle restored it all to native prairie, and my mom homeschooled my sister and I, so it was just like our magical little world.
Yeah, I mean, I could imagine, like, it sounds like it was a very pleasant, enjoyable, magical time, but, someone else maybe, or maybe if it was a different family, I don't know, you might feel sort of restricted, or did you ever feel like there were things that you were missing, did you feel sheltered at all from the rest of the world, or?
Um, Not really. We just, used to go to the library, and we'd just be, reading books about the rest of the world, and I mean, we never really traveled anywhere, but we just we were forced to use our imaginations,
Yeah.
um, and I don't know, I think there's something special about that. Of course, now that I'm an adult, I love to experience as much as I can and travel, but I think there's something about being in one place when you're young that forces you to really, really explore your imagination. Uh,
Yeah. And it sounds like you were also kind of connected to the land there?
oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, the prairie was a huge thing because, I mean, it was farm fields before the nuns had the hogs there, and it was corn, and my dad and my uncle thought, let's restore this back to native prairie, what it was before people, um, before we colonized this place, and it was just magical to see the prairie get better and fuller and more diverse every year, and they burn it every year, and it just keeps getting better. And every single year, you don't know what to expect. It's like always a surprise, and it's just a really beautiful thing to witness. And since we were homeschooled, we were just like outside all the time. Um, and we would just collect materials from the prairie and around the farm, and use it in play, use it in art. So yeah, I'm just after 9 years in New York, I'm just getting back here, and it's amazing to just be able to touch plants again, and
Yeah.
just the little pleasures of collecting sticks and putting them in a pile, or filling up a bucket with water, or getting scratches on your arms and legs from walking around in the woods. Just everything is just delighting me right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that's great, and, so how does that feed into your painting then?
Um, well, I use natural materials in my work, so I've been collecting prairie grass seeds from my family farm. Even while I was in New York, I would every time I'd come home, I would collect these seeds and then use them in my paintings in my studio. So I'm actually physically taking seeds and moss and sticking them onto the canvas and building up a textural surface, and then painting on and around them with oil paint. So there's just something very grounding to me about the act of collecting the materials, and it helps you keep this relationship going with the land,
Yeah,
which is really important to me while coming up with the ideas for the content of the work.
right. No, that's great. It sounds like when you were living in New York, you felt disconnected from nature. And people say that. I mean, I lived in New York, for a while, and I felt like, there's lots of parks and gardens and, so for me, I mean, and for a while I was living pretty close to Prospect Park, so I could just walk over and, I'm in nature, I guess, I don't know. So, but I also didn't grow up I wasn't coming from the same kind of environment as you, so, but did you feel like pretty disconnected, and was that difficult for you?
Uh,
It was a different environment, surely.
yeah, I mean, you can find nature like you're saying in New York. Um, there's a lot more going on there than people would expect, and they do have some beautiful parks, but they're just people everywhere, and I think that it's really hard um, to focus in on the nature. It's there, but it's very hidden. And when you see it and experience it, it almost feels like a little miracle or something. Whereas
Yeah.
somewhere like here, it almost feels like um, there's just so many worlds you can go into. You go outside and you look down at this anthill and you follow the ant. Like I'm really into following animals right now. Like
Right.
I'll just see an animal, I'll follow it till it disappears, and I'm like, there's so many worlds, and it's almost like I'm just living in their world, whereas in New York, it's just a very human-centric place, and so it feels like the animals are living in our world, whereas here it feels more equal or more like I'm just living in their world.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and being here now in New Mexico, I certainly there's places I can go and I'll be the only one, it's just me and the desert, or the mountains, and it is a different experience.
Yeah.
There's an artist, Emmy Whitehorse, I don't know if you know her, she was in the Venice Biennale, the last one, I think it was it the 2024, the Foreigners Everywhere one?
Mhm.
Um, and, but she's a Dene, a Navajo artist, and she has a retrospective here now in Santa Fe, at the Wheelwright Museum called Intimate Landscapes. And so her work, it's like, um, almost looks like Mark Rothko kind of washes of color, but then with these little, um she draws in what are kind of like outlines of seed pods and things, but it's sort of scrawled on and abstract. And she talks about being in a landscape and noticing these small details and feeling an intimate connection and a familiarity with, like, land that she's, you know, walked through her whole life, decades. And it doesn't change that much. It'll change a little bit, she says, animal comes by or they're building the animals are building a little nest or something. But you notice these little changes. And anyway, I just thought it was interesting because we think of landscape typically being something big and vast, and kind of the history of landscape painting in the US that's maybe tied to Manifest Destiny, and so with these big, you know, um, whatever, virgin landscapes ready to be exploited or something. But with her work, and I think your work, there's a sort of intimacy to it and like what you're describing. Um, but yeah, maybe, yeah, kind of talk about how you see, yeah, landscapes, and do you consider them, would you also use that word intimate?
Yes, it's actually exactly what I've been thinking about recently, and especially with this, like, new body of work that I'm about to show, um, in Santa Fe with the valley, um, and just like you're saying, most people will see, a New Mexico landscape with these jagged rocks, and they think it's, like, rugged and, maybe a little like it's a wild, remote place, but I'm overlaying in this new series, um, a lot of people that are reclining as they would in their own bedroom in a very, like, soft, intimate place, um and I just like the contrast of that, um,
Yeah.
because yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about well, I just really love to do reclining figures because they make you they make you think about r relaxation and intimacy um, and it makes it lets you in more to the subconscious of the figure and the subconscious of the landscape, um, in my mind. I
Yeah,
don't know,
and
it's
it's
hard to
it's
explain.
called it's called Land of Rest, right? That's
Yeah.
the title of the series, in the show?
Well, what I was first thinking about titling the show, Horizon's Bedroom, and I was thinking about how the horizon is this, like, unknown place that we can always see, but if we approach it, it just keeps, like, moving further away from us.
Right.
And so it becomes almost has this mystical quality of something unknown, like a magical world or even like a heaven or a paradise. And it's a place we'll never be let into. And um, I was imagining a I was imagining like Horizon's bedroom, so it's like a place where the land hides away and it's like the most intimate place that is completely private and where they would share their secrets, and just trying to create these worlds that and imagine what would be happening in this place.
Yeah. How much of the work is coming from your imagination purely, imagining sort of, impossible worlds on, imaginary worlds, and how much of it is it like you're actually out there spending time in nature, in landscapes, and having experiences that, um, I think I don't know, like, there's times I'll be out, somewhere and I'll see a tree that's just kind of gently moving in the breeze and it looks like it's breathing or something, and um but it'll feel like, somehow I'm having a different sort of relationship, almost like there's a consciousness in the landscape, whether that's true or not. It's a sort of a feeling I might and I'm wondering, like, how much of, like, what you're doing is are you having these kinds of experiences?
Just what you're describing, the tree moving, like, that's very relatable. Um, and yeah, I think that the basis of my inspiration comes from these little moments that I have that feel just hold a lot of power for me. Like we just did a camping trip up north to the Boundary Waters and on the border of Ontario and northern Minnesota, and um, it just everything just is teeming with life.
Mm.
And there was this all of these things happened, but there was one night where all of these, little bugs came out, were flying in this big group and flapping their wings together, buzzing, and it created this moving orb that
Oh,
was just
yeah.
floating above the water, and I would say something, and they would react to it by changing the tone of their hum and moving around, and it just blows your mind because um, you know there's science behind it, and you know that they're reacting to something probably because of a mating ritual or whatever, but it just feels so mystical.
Yeah.
And so these little I'd say most of my inspiration come from these mystical moments with nature, and since I was in New York for so long, it's a lot of remembering experiences. Um, we do get out and travel quite a bit, and I just try to write down all my memories of the things that I experienced, and then, I like to get a little distance from it so that it even becomes more embedded in my subconscious. And another thing about the rest aspect of this work, in the bedroom is, you know, when I was in New York, a lot of times my landscapes are coming out of my subconscious, and so I'm in my bedroom dreaming of these places, and that's the closest I'm gonna get to these places. And so, kinda like the scene in The Wizard of Oz where Dorothy, um, you know, is dreaming of the tornado, and you see this monstrous, tornado twirling overlaid with this face, her, like, sweet face dreaming and moving,
Yeah.
over it. And so that's another example of this, like, soft sleeping image, with this, monstrous landscape in the background, and I just really love that and the juxtaposition of that. Um, so, yeah, that's an image I keep coming back to, in my work.
Yeah, that's interesting, yeah, so, like, there might be elements in some of these landscapes that could be seen as a little bit threatening or something, but then there's also the rest as well coexisting.
Yeah, and, I mean, your bedroom is a place for care, and, I mean, in the history of landscape or the history of painting, you see reclined figures, and it it it's a lot about privilege, and then they're in these, like, soft plush beds and with silk pillows and, have, you know, maids around them,
Right.
but I see the land as our greatest privilege, and so I'm also thinking about that. So to put these figures in these positions of complete relaxation, like, but putting them into these very wild, very remote places that I just think are some of the last great things that we have. And
Yeah, absolutely. And it is interesting that you're kind of doing a mashup of these genres that we think of landscape versus kind of domestic interior scenes being very different, but and portraits. But you bring them together and it feels natural. It feels like it makes sense, you know. I wanted to ask you what was your experience at RISD like and how did that change how did your art change while you were there?
yeah, I had mixed feelings about it. Being from like a more rural place, I didn't exactly feel like I fit in right away, and um, it was really fun to just focus completely on art, um, and to learn so much about different materials. And there was a lot of good guidance, and I did end up really loving it. But it was very critique focused. It was it was a very hard program, and it was very competitive. There
Mm,
wasn't a lot of partying or, like, fun downtime. People were just in their studios. It's known for the all-nighter, so it's a lot of staying
right.
up all night to finish your projects, and, but I do feel like it helped prepare me to be a professional artist because you need a really good work ethic, um, and yeah, I mean, now I work 9 to 5 pretty much every day on, painting just like it would be any other job.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's good. I think that, you know, artists have different ways of working, but if you can have that discipline, I think that's well, it serves you well, you know. Um Yeah, I mean, was that something that came naturally to you, or, did you have to kinda work to get on that kind of schedule?
Um, it came pretty naturally to me because being homeschooled already, you have to make your own schedule,
Oh, yeah.
and I think that I learned a lot just from that and naturally had that in me. But I never get tired of it. Like I pretty much have to force myself to stop painting at the end of the day. I'm like, that's too much. We don't need to paint more than 8 hours, Sophia.
Right.
It's just really fun. I wish there was more time in the day to to make to create more things. And now that I'm in a place that's more affordable and I have more space, I want to get more experimental and um like although New York is so great for so many reasons, I think that there's not a lot of experimenting that's happening there right now because of the restraints of it being too expensive for people, the studios are
Yeah.
expensive, um, and people just wanna, they don't have the time and the space to be doing anything outside the box, really.
Right, right. Yeah, it's definitely tough place to you know, I really like New York, but it was always tough to, you know, cost of living and everything, so,
Yeah.
um, you know, I'm interested though, you were talking about RISD, and I know, you know, typically people say RISD and Yale are probably the 2 top art schools. I mean, you know, you can be an artist without going to school and be a great artist or go to any school. I think there's great professors everywhere. But, you know, when you look at, like, who's getting in the most shows and whose, you know, work is at the auctions, you know, it's typically, um, largest percentage is Yale and then RISD. There's sort of networks and connections and stuff. So, of course, there's gonna be competitiveness as well. From whenever I visited RISD and the feeling I got, I felt like it seemed as an outsider, maybe friendlier than Yale, but I don't know if, it might depend on the particular cohort or what your experience was, but did by the end of it, do you feel like you made some friends there?
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah.
did, and and it was awesome to come to New York after RISD because so many people end up there, and then you have this built-in community of people that you can go to be like, "Oh, I don't know what's going on in my studio. Let me know what you think of this. Which galleries are sketchy to work with?
Yeah.
What should I do about this contract?" Um, it's just it was really awesome to reconnect. And there's a lot of people I wasn't even really friends with in school that I connected with afterwards. That was so happy that I had um, met, and I ended up being really glad to have gone to RISD for those connections. It felt like a huge privilege. But in any other city, it doesn't really matter so much. Like in Minneapolis, it wouldn't matter at all that I had gone to RISD.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think even in New York, it's like maybe you tell someone that you went to RISD, then they'll look at your work, but the work still has to be good, and it has to fit in what the gallery's showing, and they have to be looking for new artists, right? So it's kinda like I think, you know, but having those connections, I guess, is I'm glad that you did come out of it feeling like you had friends. It's 'cause at first it sounded like it was just, like, kinda competitive and not maybe your first impression, of the program it wasn't maybe as welcoming as you expected, but sounds like it got a little better as it went on.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just really different from anything I'd ever experienced. I had never spent any time on the East Coast before.
Mm,
I'm just like a farm kid from the central Minnesota, so it was a bit of a culture shock, but,
yeah.
um, now I understand that world, and I think it just took me a while to appreciate it.
And do you think that initially people had prejudices and stereotypes, even maybe it's unconscious and they don't wanna admit it, but knowing that you came from a farm or, that you were from another place, that they, I don't know, sort of maybe they didn't think that you would be as sophisticated as them or something. Like, sometimes
Um,
people do have these prejudices. I don't
Maybe
know.
there was a little bit of that, but I think it was more in my mind than in theirs. Um but I did feel, a lot of people came from money and did come from big cities and already understood the art world to some degree. And I was just from a different universe. So maybe I had prejudice against them and not the way around. But they did make fun of my accent, my Minnesota accent a little
Oh,
bit.
yeah. People love to make fun of accents, you know?
Yeah.
But, yeah, but, if someone's listening to this and they're like, an art student in New Mexico, um, maybe from a more rural part of the state or something, um, and they're thinking about, they're like a teenager, they're thinking about where, if they can get into a place like RISD or, do you think that it's a valuable experience and that they should do that? Are you glad that
Yeah,
you went in the
I
end?
think I think so. I think to just um go in with a very open mind and experiment with as many materials and as you can, and try to ask as many questions of the professors as you can, then it's totally worth it. There's just the libraries there, and also that you can take classes at Brown at an Ivy League school. I didn't take advantage of that. Um, and Providence is a great city. I wouldn't tell anybody not to go there. If they can get in
Yeah,
with the scholarship, then they should do it.
yeah. And let me just ask you one more thing, because I think it's always interesting whenever I talk to painters, artists in general, but I think especially painters. Sometimes the the art that you all look at is not necessarily what I might expect looking at your work. Because sometimes you might be looking at old master painters, or you might be looking at who knows what art from different places. And I'm wondering if there's, you know, maybe artists who have influenced you or who you've been looking at recently that might be surprising, but would be interesting as a sort of connection that you're thinking about?
Um, well, it's funny. I couldn't afford to do the Rome program, which is like the big study abroad program at RISD while I was there, but I just went to Italy for the first time a few months ago,
Mm.
and I've been referencing these Renaissance painters for so long in my work, um, as the figures in the landscape and using these classical forms. And a lot of times I didn't even remember who the artist was, but going there and seeing some of the work in person, being like, "Oh wait, I referenced that. I referenced that Botticelli in one of my paintings before, and now I'm seeing it in person." It was just completely crazy to me.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that the favorites that I keep coming back to of the Italian painters, and you'll hear so many painters say this, but Piero della Francesca is probably the ultimate
Yeah.
best. And then the Giotto frescoes, I can't even
Yeah.
it's just like so cool. And going into just the fact you can go into any church and there's masterworks and frescoes by all of these painters. Yeah, and you wouldn't immediately like look at my work and be like, "Oh, she's influenced by the Italian Renaissance," but I think every painter to some degree is. But that's just really been in the back of my mind a lot recently.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think that it actually does make a lot of sense, you know, with your work, but yeah, it may not be the first reference, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
I also
uh,
love like Grandma Moses and
oh yeah.
a lot of more outsider and folk work.
Yeah, and I can see that too, and it's kinda like you're bringing it together in a way in your work, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's very, very cool. Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and I hope you enjoyed this. You think it went well?
I think so.
I think
Thanks
it
for
was
having
good.
me.
Yeah.
That's really fun.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you.